Good evening. Let me welcome everyone to the second part of our annual conference. My name is Michelle Teo. We will begin this evening's session with a pre-recording of the speech being delivered by the Minister for Law and Home Affairs, Mr. S. Shanmugam. Let me talk a little bit about Minister. He's a lawyer by profession, and he was admitted to the Singapore Bar as an advocate and solicitor in 1985. In 2008, Minister Shanmugam was appointed a cabinet minister and is now the Minister for Home Affairs and the Minister for Law. He will speak about his impressions of the Middle East, talk a little bit about the geopolitics. Yesterday, in our first day of the program, we opened the event with a speech delivered by the Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean, who talked about the geopolitics and how we now face, including in the Middle East, an increasingly volatile and complicated environment. He spoke about the transformations that are occurring, the potential for cooperation between the regions, but he also talked about how Muslim communities across Southeast Asia would be watching closely the transformations in the Middle East. In our first panel, which looked at geopolitics, there was a recognition that there's now a very complicated network of different regional alliances. I think one thing that came out of that session was that no one wants to have a really difficult competition in the Middle East. They don't want the Middle East to become an arena of competition, but there will be pressures on the states in the Middle East over time as there's this push and pull among the external players. Looking at the economics of it, I think clearly the Ukraine-Russia war is having an impact, but there is also a recognition among the Middle East that there must be some diversification of their economies. And I think that for both India and China, there is an interest in what is happening in this part of in the Middle East, what is happening, how it's developing, and what roles they can play, what they can bring to it. And they both have very different views. Let's now hear from Minister for Law and Home Affairs, Mr. K. Shanmugam, and then we will proceed with the last panel for this conference. Thank you.
Mr. Bilahari Kausigan, Chairman, Middle East Institute, Ms. Michelle Teo, Executive Director, Middle East Institute, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for inviting me to deliver this keynote address here today. Over the last couple of years, there have been significant geopolitical change in the Middle East. You can say that ever so often about the Middle East, but you can also say that about many other parts of the world. Talk about Asia, Europe in the last few years, and before that, significant change as well. Coming back to the Middle East, on the 28th of April, Turkish President Erdogan visited Saudi Arabia. The first time he has done so in years. The visit is being viewed by observers as an attempt to repair ties. Syria had been shunned by the Arab world, now looks to be on its way back into the Arab world. In March, the Syrian president met the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. But perhaps the most substantial change has been the Abraham Accords. The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan have formalized ties with Israel. And others have their ties too, growing stronger, but on the quiet. Now, trade and people-to-people ties are growing. Arab and Israeli business delegations, tourists are traveling to and from. Israel and UAE are reportedly concluding a free trade agreement. Next month, on the 23rd of June, Emirates will begin daily flights from Dubai to Tel Aviv. And in March, Israel hosted the Negev Summit. It was attended by the Egyptian, Emirati, Bahraini, and Moroccan foreign ministers and their Israeli and American counterparts. The once unthinkable has become more than thinkable. It is becoming reality. Facts are changing fast. The details about the summit are few, but they point towards further normalization of the Arab-Israeli relationship. In the wake of the Abraham Accords, the question many are asking, which countries will be next? In particular, what will Saudi Arabia do? There are signs of warming relationships between the two. And in the context of all these changes, how will the Muslim majority countries in our region react to these changes? And in parallel with the geopolitical changes, there are also significant experiments on taking a different economic and social approach. Saudi Arabia and UAE are trying this. In Saudi Arabia, women are no longer required to put on the hijab, and some don't. Saudi women are allowed to drive and work. Concerts by Western acts and cinemas have also made a return in Saudi Arabia. I went to the World Expo in Dubai this year. The Saudi Arabian pavilion, there was a film that was shown. It's quite interesting. It gives a sense of the social changes taking place. The film is about 7 minutes long and stars John Travolta. You can find it online. I will have a short excerpt played. It's about 1.5 minutes. Pay close attention to the language used and how the women are depicted in the film.
And in between, one of the greatest melting pots anywhere in the world. A scintillating cultural feast for the senses.
And cut!
With nature, technology, and each other, a unique ecosystem for the mind, body, and soul, a sacred haven where creative and innovative minds mix, driven by a shared passion for limitless thinking. Life in Saudi Arabia is like a circle, a journey through time that never ends, where the past meets the present, and the tantalizing future full of wonders is always within reach.
If you see, the women, none are wearing the hijab. In the language, let me quote, one of the greatest melting pots in the world. One of the greatest melting pots in the world. Another quote, building a sustainable future for everyone. Another quote, transform how mankind interacts with nature, technology, and each other. It's aspirational language. 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, I think one would not have automatically associated such language like, quote, one of the greatest melting pots, close quotes, with Saudi Arabia. Even now, it is aspirational, waiting to be turned into reality. This is a vision. Observers have commented. It is coming from the top. It has to percolate down and be accepted. And that is work in progress. Saudi Arabia has also set out its ambitions for the future green city of NEOM and Saudi Vision 2030, and it has invested substantially into these projects. The UAE likewise has charted a new path, and some might say a bold new path. It is moving towards having some rules based on a more secular footing. It has, for example, decriminalized alcohol consumption, cohabitation by couples who are not married, amongst other things. The approach is that Dubai in particular is a cosmopolitan place. It's open for business, welcomes people from all over the world. I was in Dubai about a month ago. There is a buzz and energy, a drive to change and move. The UAE is also promoting itself as a nation of interfaith tolerance. They are active congregations of other faiths, while the UAE Ministry of Tolerance spearheads a drive for religious harmony. Some changes are also taking place in other countries in the Gulf on a different scale. The World Cup kicks off at the end of this year in Qatar. World Cup and the presence of thousands of fans will in itself create a change dynamic. The changes in the Gulf are driven in a large part by the countries in the region seeking to diversify their economies. They are looking to change attitudes, change the social compact, bring in talent from around the world. What are the impact of these changes? Big question with several ifs. One key question is if the changes can be continued through and whether the forces unleashed by the changes can be managed, or whether the reactions might be very strong and difficult to manage. What we can say is the leaders in charge seem to know what they are doing and they will seek to manage them. What is the impact of these geopolitical and socio-economic changes if they continue? First, these regional realignments will likely have an impact on the balance of power in the Middle East. Iran has always been a key player in the region, but it is not a given that the shifts that we see will result in the region being divided into two blocks with Iran on one side and its allies, and the Gulf states on the other. The states will act in their best interests depending on issue by issue. Saudi Arabia and Iran held a fifth round of direct talks recently, and a 2-month truce in Yemen is still holding. So it is not a certainty to suggest that they will be opposed, but nor is it clear that the sides are any closer despite these diplomatic initiatives. But many think that there is room for some guarded optimism. Second, the impact of these changes will not just be in the Middle East. They are also being watched closely in Southeast Asia, for example, amongst other regions. Muslims in this region, including in Singapore, have long looked to the Middle East as Islam's center of gravity. The countries of the Gulf are taking steps to prepare themselves for a very different world in the decades to come in a bid to stay prosperous, vibrant, attractive. And they have set out to reform not just their economies, but also their societies. As the practice of Islam in the region evolves, how will Muslims throughout Southeast Asia react? That can have significant social consequences for our region, Southeast Asia. Third, the economic interrelationships between the Middle East and Southeast Asia are likely to grow. There are likely to be big investments in this region because this is a region with 600 million people, a continuing growing economy, and it's already one of the top 10 economies in the world if you take Southeast Asia as a whole, with a young population. So there are plenty of opportunities, and the Middle East has spare capital to invest. The UAE, for example, has made massive investments in Indonesia. Opportunities will grow, and there will be competition, including for talent. The Gulf, for example, is already attracting a large number of Asians to work, play, and live there. And that is part of the reason they are changing their whole environment. Trade between the two regions will also continue to grow. What will all of this mean? It creates many different imponderables. These are key questions for us. I have raised some questions. The next panel is on the Abraham Accords and its implications for ASEAN. I think we have opportunity to consider some of the questions I have raised. Thank you.